the comments?
The comments are on the side of the video. You have to go on the side video. But we are now live. Welcome to this Ask Me Anything. I'm sorry that we're a little bit late. We've had a few technical issues, which is why you can currently see a picture of Tiago rather than actual Tiago. But hopefully, if you bear with us, that shouldn't make too much of a difference. But I'm joined by Nathan Clark and Tiago Esteval. And we are going to start off talking about Manchester United and the result tonight against PSG. And then we're going to go into questions. Please feel free to ask questions. You can ask questions either on Twitter and we'll see them, or you can go to the sidebar on the YouTube channel and there is a live chat where you can just throw your questions in there. Please do send some questions through because it would be nice to have some questions. But who wants to kick off talking about Manchester United PSG?
Well, Tiago, you didn't watch it, did you? So
you didn't watch it.
I didn't watch either game because I was giving practice. So first thing I want to ask is, was it a 3-back or was it Alves as centre mid, or what happened?
So PSG played this sort of wonky mix where they were sort of a 3-4-3 in possession, and then they moved into a 4-4-2 out of possession. So Alves played sort of the wing back, but then right midfield. And Di Maria played sort of a forward, but then came back into a left midfield position. What's the right-sided centre back's name again?
Kerrer.
So he was moving between right centre back and right back, and just sort of shutting across, which is certainly interesting. I don't know if it was hugely effective. I'm not entirely sure of the reasoning for it. I guess simply that the way they occupied space in possession was effective. And they felt that had holes in it in a defensive shape, so they just shifted across. Saves Alves from sort of having to cover huge amounts of ground because he is like pushing 40 now.
Yeah, he is 35.
The most remarkable thing for me was how good Marquinhos was in midfield. But I guess I just didn't expect him to play the way that he played in this game. So, anyone's thoughts on Marquinhos, particularly on Pogba?
I don't know what happened, but I like Marquinhos in general. Like, I think I like him on the ball. I like his positional sense. I think he's physically a very interesting player. He has very few flaws, and doesn't shock me totally that he's fine in midfield. I'm not sure how much he contributes once you get to like the opposition half or into the final third, or depending on who you're playing against as well. But like, doesn't shock me too much. I don't know what happened with him and Pogba. I know Pogba got red carded. I don't quite know what happened. So if you could enlighten me, that'd be lovely. Cole says "Allez PSG."
PSG definitely allied. So
yep, yeah, they definitely Deli allied them. Okay, Nathan, talk.
Pretty quiet through the game. And you only really saw him. He had quite a nice bursting run down the right-hand side. Managed to get around Kimpembe pretty easily, and then around Thiago Silva, and then flash the ball across the box. But other than that, he was kept fairly quiet. And yeah, put a few silly challenges in, and both of the yellow card tackles were pretty silly. So I was a bit disappointed. You know, it's one of those games where you do want to see him perform well. You want to see. You want to see him, sort of the reward he gets, right, for sticking at Manchester United through the Mourinho era, and it just didn't really come off for him. But Nathan will have much more tactically astute things to say than that.
So United under Solskjaer, but also beforehand, play sort of between a 4-3-3 and a 4-2-3-1, and they sort of might lean more one way than the other. And tonight they definitely led into a 4-2-3-1, so with Pogba playing as the 10 rather than the left-sided central midfielder. And I feel that was the wrong way to go. I think that up until they did concede from the corner, I thought United did an impressive job defensively. I thought they prevented PSG from having much effect in the final third, and they also managed to press PSG fairly well, but they didn't really offer much in attack outside of a couple of counter attacks. And I feel that not having Pogba really involved until they entered the final third was a big problem for them there. I think that they needed him on the ball more and earlier in their attacks.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why they played Marquinhos in midfield was to stem Pogba a little bit more, and that clearly paid off. Other than that, I guess the big talking point from the game was the fact that once Lingard went off and Martial went off, United had very, very little in the way of any attacking bite. And so I suppose that's one thing we've not really been talking about in the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer period, is that they actually have very, very thin depth of squad. Do we think that this is going to affect them going forward in the season? Do we think that actually this result could be could be the beginning of a slump, perhaps, for United going forward into the Premier League?
Could even be beneficial to
How's
be knocked out of the Champions League. Could even be beneficial to, like, having in account that they do have a thin squad. Could be beneficial for them to, like, just focus on the Premier League, where they're massively overperforming already, regardless. So I'm not quite sure. If they do enter a slump, I'm not quite sure how much of that you can put on this defeat and how much of it you can put on them just being overperforming beforehand.
I've just been looking at the chat. Someone's asked, what did Rachel change second half to take total control from 46 to 19? Lee Fraser, that is. I guess he means Tuchel. He's corrected himself. Yeah. What about the tactical changes that Tuchel did? Did you?
Oh, Rachel, nice.
I guess that's autocorrect, right?
That is funny. Nathan.
That's a good question, and I don't know. I think I.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so I don't think he made a sub until sort of 60. So he must have done a shape change, and it flew right over my head. I did have troubles with my stream during that period of the game, if that's much of an excuse. But yeah, sorry, I missed that one, I'm afraid, Lee.
I think it was as much to do with Lingard going off as well. That
Sure.
And I think, I don't know. I guess I'm always surprised at how effective Lingard is. He's just a really good presser, for one, and I think that made a huge difference in PSG being able to move the ball in their own half a little better. But yeah, it is interesting for me going forward what this Manchester United side do, because obviously it's early days with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. They've had I don't know how many games, not more than 10. In the Premier League, they've not played any. They've only played one team who were in the top half, I believe, and that was Spurs, who were quite unlucky to not get a result. Sorry to bring that up, Nathan. But do we think that gives a much better account of how good Manchester United are?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's been any surprises here. They were the second best team, but they didn't embarrass themselves in any way. And I feel that's kind of where you would expect them to be, roughly anyway. They're a decent team, and I think there's potential upside if they do stick with Ole Gunnar sort of more long term. But they're certainly not world beaters. So yeah, it's pretty much. I don't think it's changed anything.
We've got a question from Mafro Davis. Thoughts on Mbappe's overall performance?
I did feel that he was underutilized by PSG tonight. I didn't think they found him that well. And again, that's largely down to the way United defended narrow, and the fact that Mbappe was playing straight up the centre. I thought he could have moved wide. Maybe that's what happened between the 46th and 90th minute and 9. Hang on, 46th and 90th rather than 46th. Okay, so the changes towards the end of the game was bringing on Paredes for Verratti. Sorry, I'm cycling back to the previous question. Let me just quickly have a look at the subs. But yeah, I was slightly disappointed that we didn't sort of see another sort of narrative building game for Mbappe tonight, where he sort of tore things up quite a bit. So yeah, Paredes for Verratti is a like for like. And then Dagba, who I don't know a ton about, from Di Maria. I think I remember the announcers saying that he was a defensive player, but then he operated on the wing. That might have been a wing back thing. But that's just sort of, a straightforward, at least slightly different.
Yeah. Dagba has been mainly playing right back or left back, but he only has like 200 league minutes. This was his UCL debut, so Again, I didn't watch, so I can't tell you what he did, but he's usually a fullback, and he's like a very young, probably 20-year-old kid. I think it's very interesting that United didn't utilize Lukaku in this game pretty much. I thought this would be, having an account that from your recollection of events, that once they didn't have Lingard and Martial space to get in behind PSG, they didn't really have much of an attacking threat. I assumed that it was more of a game for Lukaku up top and for more of a long ball type of situation with perhaps Rashford on the wing, or even making that sub earlier could have perhaps been interesting. But again, with the reminder that I'm just tossing opinions without.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that they were forced into an early sub with in the end it was Lingard who went off in the first half and he went for Sanchez. I think there is definitely a case to be made for Lukaku coming on, and also Lukaku playing wide as we have seen.
Yeah, it could also work.
Yeah, playing wide right in that way that he does, a very particular sort of style that he has when he operates there. I think that could have been a game for that maneuver.
Yeah, and like Mata wide is pretty much a waste, as we all have unanimously agreed. And I'm assuming you brought in Mata to play wide since you brought off Martial.
Yeah.
Which is just like not really how you. Yeah. Not really how I'm assuming you should operate against this PSG in that type of situation.
Colin Dagba's a great name, though, isn't it? It's like a tribute act to Paul Pogba. That's what I was thinking when he came on. I don't know much about him at all. Do keep your questions coming in, guys. We are currently without questions, so we are at a stage where we literally want you to ask us anything.
Did any of you watch Porto at all?
Absolutely not. Can you tell us anything, Tiago, about the Roma midfielder who scored 2 goals, Zaniolo? Is that right?
I can't tell you much other than his numbers look really nice.
Okay.
But if it's just to say that, I'm sure you can follow Ash on Twitter and have the same outcome. Point is, his numbers look really good. He came in from Inter, I believe, and he's now been playing this season. From the lineups I'm seeing, it seems like he played from wide today, but he's usually a 10. And yeah, I haven't really seen that much game footage of him yet, but his numbers, his creation numbers look good. His bot survival numbers look good. He scored twice today. We're again not quite sure what the goals were, but Porto had a couple of injuries as well. They were semi-weak, and their defense was their usual defense, but yeah.
Were you surprised when you saw the result, Tiago?
No, this is pretty much the result I expect. I definitely expected Porto to score. I definitely think Porto is the strongest team out of the two, if they were both with their full 11s. But Porto is without 2 very important players that are usual starters and that didn't start today. And then I assumed they would score. I assumed they'd either get a 1-1 draw, lose 2-1, something like that. I think they definitely have a shot at home. But it largely depends on how quickly Marega gets back. It depends on how well Corona does. Corona has been really, really important this season. He was suspended. Very, very interesting suspension, by the way. In the last game of the group stage, I understand this is a very niche comment, but in the second to last game of the group stage, Corona basically got a yellow on purpose so he could miss the last game of the group stage and not the first round of 16 match. And since it was on purpose, UEFA awarded him an extra game of suspension so he couldn't play today. So I think that's very interesting.
That's like Harry Kane getting injured before the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, pretty much. But this Porto's manager actually asked him to waste time until he got a yellow on a free kick or some shit, just so he could clean his bill of yellows and miss the last game of the group stage, which was unimportant because Porto was through. And then UEFA was like, "Well, no, you're getting an extra game of suspension," which I thought it was great.
I guess
having an account, we're always criticizing UEFA. I think it was a solid move. Yeah, sorry, Nathan.
No, just I guess that once you start to do that, you then have to you find yourself in the situation where you have to decide which yellow cards are and aren't deliberate, and that can get a bit tricky. And they don't.
I mean, yeah, this one was really obvious though. It was just wasting time before a free kick in the middle of the pitch before coming off. He was supposed to come off and he wasted time until the referee got him a yellow. Then he shook his hand and then he came off. and it was very much like deliberate and like everyone does this and it's fine. But now that it's getting like punished, then your approach to it needs to change, right?
So we need to have yellow card coaches in teams. So what you're saying, elite teams need yellow card coaches. How to subtly do that.
Okay, shut up, John. Read the question.
So I got a question from Lee Fraser again. How do you see tomorrow's matches going? That's a good question.
That's something I can answer. Yes.
Two matches on the go. There's the Spurs game with Dortmund that obviously Nathan will have thoughts on, and then there's the Real Madrid Ajax game as well, which I think everyone thought was going to be a bit closer than I think they're thinking it's going to be now. But who wants to kick off with which game? I think you should take one each. Nathan could take the Spurs one. And
go on, Nathan. Do the thing.
I am looking forward to catching the Ajax Madrid game like on a replay at some point, but I'm not hugely optimistic about playing Dortmund. I did a little preview thread on Twitter looking at how Dortmund play and how Spurs might like to approach it. In that Tuchel is that's a terrible pronunciation, forgive me, but Tuchel, it's not even fucking him, is it? Dortmund.
Favre.
Yeah. Are sort of based on the idea of patience both in and out of possession, in that they will really take their time to build up an attack if that's how long it takes, or if there's space to go into, they'll counter fast. And when out of the ball, the way they press is really odd, because they don't tend to put, occasionally they do, but they don't tend to put a huge amount of pressure on the man the ball. Instead, they will just stand in between passing lanes and make it difficult that way. And yeah, they're really interesting. They have a really interesting identity, and just looking at that, it provides sort of interesting sort of theory questions on how do you play against that. But putting specifics aside, I think you look at the general quality, and at the moment Dortmund have the edge. I think there's some similarity here in that they're two good teams currently going through a bit of a rough patch, but when you're top of the Bundesliga and you're going through a rough patch, you're still pretty good. So. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I wouldn't rule it out for Spurs at all, but I'm feeling Dortmund have the edge, at least over the two legs.
I think that while we're on this game, I feel like if there's a moment in time in this season where Tottenham can beat Dortmund, it's this one. Not because Tottenham are doing particularly well, simply because Dortmund have so many injuries. Like they're like, this is the two most injured teams in Europe facing against each other, and I feel like Tottenham just happened to be more used to being injured at the moment, because like you haven't had a squad in ages. But Dortmund are without Royce, which is very important, without Alcacer, without, then the back line, they're without Weigl, Akanji, and Piszczek. So it's going to be a really not ideal squad. Their back line should be fine. Zagadou should come in for Akanji, and Hakimi should play right back. Guerreiro should play left back possibly. So their backline situation should be somewhat usable, but their attack, even with Sancho doing Sancho things, won't pack quite the same punch. It'll probably end up being Götze playing up top, which I'm still not sure if I'm fond of, and they still need to bring someone for the wing. I don't know if it's going to be Pulisic, if it's going to be Larson. But either way, their attack without Alcácer, without Royce, really won't pack the same punch. So if there's a moment in time where Tottenham can get a bit of an edge, I think it could be here.
For the English speakers, the names that Tiago was saying there were Guerreiro. We've become acclimatized to correct Portuguese pronunciations, but I'll pass on.
There's one Portuguese player, and I decided to go for it.
No, it's good. I like it. I think it's good. I'm just clarifying. Lee Fraser asking Vertonghen or Kyle Walker-Peters at left back against Sancho. Nathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Sancho might play left or right, just to be sure there. But I would expect Pochettino to lean towards Vertonghen at left back. I don't know if I would make. And also, don't rule out playing a back three. Then you still need a left wing back. I also wouldn't be shocked to see both Trippier and Doria start with one of them on the left, depending on Probably depending on how Dortmund shape up. Basically, you put the names down on the sheet and you decide afterwards. I'd like Kyle Walker-Peters to get game time, but this probably isn't the game for him, and I assume Pochettino feels that way as well.
So Tiago, let's talk about the Real Madrid Ajax game. What are you thinking?
Well, as you said, we all kind of assumed it would be a much closer game than it might be, but still, first game in the Netherlands, so that could be interesting. I think there is a problem with Frankie, which could really impact the game. I'm not sure if it's confirmed that he'll miss yet, that he'll be missed out on the game, but it's kind of 50-50. So I'm assuming that even if he plays, he probably won't be doing completely free-flowing Frankie things. So that will be extremely impactful for sure. And on the other side, I haven't watched Real too much this season, especially not since they switched managers. But Vinicius has looked pretty good. Vinicius has definitely impressed me through highlights and stuff, since I really haven't been watching them too much. And their midfield is back to normal with Casemiro behind Kroos and Modric, so I think they should be fine, but it's definitely going to be a closer game than in other seasons, I suppose.
Now, have you got any thoughts on Ajax?
No, just I think it could be a pretty exciting game, and Ajax have been repeatedly underrated over the last, 5 years when they have been in the Champions League. So don't write them off.
Jason sent a question through about Ajax actually, which is why has Kasper Dolberg's stock dropped so much in the last couple of seasons? Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have not really been that keen on him myself for a long time. I think that his stock comes a lot.
I think he's fine.
Yeah, no,
that's about it. That's about it, right?
Yeah, essentially, and I think a lot of his stock is simply the fact that he was playing up front or around up front for Ajax, and people assume that if you do that, you must be good, especially if you're fairly young. And
it definitely inflates your numbers to a certain extent as well.
And he's not that young anymore. I think that's the main thing. Hang on, let me check how old he is.
He's pretty young, isn't he? Like, I didn't feel like he was that old.
He's 21 still, but
he's my age.
A little boy, a child, youngster. So,
so being up front for especially that Ajax team definitely like inflates your numbers to a certain extent. But I'd say there are plenty of Ajax players that you should be more excited for. Even without counting Frankie, we all talk about Ziyech almost like every day, because he should be like everyone's number one target as an attacking mid and all of that, which is factually correct. He's amazing, but especially I really like both Ajax fullbacks this season. Tagliafico on the left, he's played for Argentina at the World Cup. He's not really unknown, but Mazraoui has really only come up this season from the B team, and he's just been really, really good. And I really like both fullbacks. And there's obviously still De Ligt there. Now there's Blind. There's Blind to kind of counterbalance all the youngsters. So it's still a pretty fun team, but I definitely feel like Dolberg, when compared to all the other talents, is kind of underwhelming. But yeah, it might just be me.
When you said that you think that playing for this Ajax team inflates your numbers, is that simply because they're such a good team?
I'm not saying this. I'm saying like the whichever team got to the Europa League final, as that was the season where Dolberg was really irrated. So was it Peter Bosz in charge of Ajax? Yeah, a manager I really dislike, by the way. But yeah, so that team was like super creative, has really good attacking numbers, and just kind of helps out everybody up front. And then you check out the following seasons, and you only really see Dolberg falling down. You see Nez has kind of fallen off a little bit as well, but like only Ziyech has kept up his extraordinary numbers. They really are. He's wild.
Ziyech has not been picked up by anyone, because it's something that I see on Twitter.
I don't know. Maybe it's just like not like we don't know that much about him, like in terms of personality. So maybe he's just not great in that sense. The fact that he's not that young definitely kind of puts off teams, especially because you're looking at Eredivisie teams, you're looking at Ajax and the prices that Ajax kind of practice in the market right now, and it's like you know that you're gonna have to pay a premium, but you're supposedly getting a youngster that is gonna like increase his value or that's gonna be your player for a long, long time. And Ziyech is like 25, 26 already. Let me check. He is 25. Yeah, he's gonna be 26 next month. So it's not like he's this super young talent, and Ajax is probably asking for well.
That's what the reports are, is that Ajax are asking quite a lot for him. I think Dortmund and
Which are numbers that we probably deem worth it, but at the same time, I almost understand all the questions about the Eredivisie and how you shouldn't like overspend on attacking players from the Eredivisie because it's an incredibly niche league with very niche situations for attacking players. But Ziyech is so incredibly talented that you could start for any team in the world, and that's probably not City, but all the teams in the world behind City, but that's not really a team, and that's a pretty good compliment, I think. I think that's good enough to put him up. But at the same time, I understand the worries that certain teams have on betting on him and on betting so much on him.
Yeah, you've been a fan of Ziyech as well. Now, have you any things you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to add to what Tiago says, you go to Ajax when you are prepared to take a risk on a younger talent with an especially high ceiling. And I think Ajax's interpretation, which is totally valid, of Ziyech is that he is already at that level and therefore he commands a high sum.
Yeah.
We have an MLS question.
God damn it. I saw it. But I think half the question is MLS, the other half is just like for Nathan's tactical gibberish.
So I'll read the question out. Which the question is, what should make me excited about Philadelphia Union switching from possession 4-2-3-1 to a hunter-killer 4-4-2, inspired by German football? I guess that's the 4-2-2-2, which is kind of a high-pressing formation generally. And then he says to go outside Europe. I'm not sure what he means there, but that's Matt Bogard. Nat, do you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, so I don't watch much MLS, but just looking at it from a pure theory perspective, the way and the reason that sort of that German counter-pressing 4-2-2-2 trend came about is essentially a reaction to the popularization of Spanish and Dutch influenced possession football. So if you're going back to that rock paper scissors thing with Tiago again,
So smart.
Yeah, the Germanic thing is simply the paper to the possession rock or whatever. That doesn't mean that it's guaranteed to work. Implementation is obviously the most important thing. But if everyone else in the league is now trying to play a possession game, if your team is playing,
I mean, MLS is very, very pressing right now. I think the top teams at least are very high pressing. Red Bulls are super high pressing. That they've been for years. Atlanta are very high pressing. Only like from the top teams, only NYCFC is more possession based. But regardless, to add on to your point, I think it has the added benefit of suiting many of the players in the team. It definitely suits the David Akam and Fafa Picault more than the previous system, which is great because David Akam is great and he was kind of off last year. I think guys like Bedoya will be fine in the pressing system, so it should be an interesting situation. The Philly Union centre backs, they have a super young centre back duo, so they should be fine to cover space. I don't know them that well. I'm just going off the fact that they're young, so they should theoretically be able to move. And but I don't know the manager, so I have no idea about how it will be implemented. And so I guess I gotta go read some MLS season previews, which you should, because it's a fun league. What else is happening?
I was going to ask Nathan if he wanted to finish off his thought before you jumped in on him, but you anything?
I just added to his point. It was
He's in full flow.
No, I
Yeah.
don't think I was going anywhere with it. That's fine. Don't worry.
See, I feel when Nathan is just rambling.
That's it.
Whoa. We do have another question. I'm just checking we haven't missed anything out. There was a question from Ryan Quinn, actually. We should probably just go on to before we move on to the Europa League stuff. But he says, considering the result, Pogba's late red card, is the game entirely out of United's hands? And how should United approach the second leg? I'll hand that one over to. I mean, I'm pretty convinced that that's it for United now. I can't see them getting out of this one really, especially without Pogba. And I guess,
but please play Lukaku. That's about it.
yeah, I mean, if I were in charge of the club, then I would maybe do that. But unfortunately, I'm not. So we'll have to wait and see what Solskjaer does.
As if you'd want to be in charge of United, John.
I wouldn't know. You're right. It would be.
It'd be a nightmare.
But it is a good question. How do you think the Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will approach this one? Do you think? I mean, they're going to have to go for it at some point, but at what point do they go for it? Do they try and sit out the first half and then go out in the second half, or do you think they have to start from the off?
It's not like they've shown many different approaches with Solskjaer, right?
Yeah.
They've only really shown one phase per se, right? So you can't really expect much other than to like bring in Lukaku. Perhaps it's not like you can count on Alexis Sanchez and all of that because you can't. He's apparently dead. And yeah, so to replace Paul Pogba, I think perhaps he could use Mata centrally. That would be fun. But if you're going into another game where you don't have the ball and you're playing Mata as a 10 or as an interior midfielder, that's just kind of pointless as well. So if that's the case, then you might as well just play, I don't know, whomever. Is Fred okay? Was Fred on the bench? I don't know. I legitimately don't know.
Me neither. I was pretty pro on Fred based on what he was doing before he was at United, but now I'm not sure, especially with him not getting that many minutes under a second manager.
Yeah, that's definitely worrying. But they need to replace him with someone. He was on the bench. So Fred was the midfielder that was on the bench. So I'm assuming he could come in if not Mata. There's always the Brazilian kid, yeah. But if Fred was on the bench today, then I'm assuming Fred could provide a more similar role to Pogba. Or well, Andreas does that too. But regardless, I think Mata could be fun, but only if you're gonna approach it in more of a possession, with more of a possession approach. But then if you do that, PSG just kind of kills you on the counter. So yeah, and it's not like they have routines on the ball with Solskjaer or not too much, you know. So I'm really not quite sure. I'd just play Lukaku, but I might just like Lukaku too much. Nathan.
Yeah, I think that the red card for Pogba is worse than conceding a third goal. I think that's sort of, it's not the final nail in the coffin, as we know from football. You know, bizarre and crazy things do happen, but it's pretty slim now. I'm not sure approach wise what I could suggest other than, yeah, sure, play Lukaku. I think that a 2-0 lead is small enough that PSG will come forwards. So you don't have to go gung-ho from the beginning. I think you can at least attempt to get something by playing off the counter, but it has to be a very proactive and it has to be a fruitful counter-attack.
Just remember, sorry, John, just remember that Lingard can play in that Pogba role as well and just bring in Lukaku straight for Pogba with Lingard in midfield, in theory.
Depending on whether or not Lingard is still injured at that point, I suppose. I think it looked like a maybe.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
It could, yeah, that could affect him. In terms of Fred, I was just interested whether or not, because obviously Fred was playing in the for Shakhtar Donetsk, and I think a lot of it, we only really get the data from the Champions League from Shakhtar.
Yep.
So whether or not that sample size data perhaps favoured Fred, but that wouldn't necessarily make sense. Because obviously the Champions League you'd think would be harder, but would there be any sense in which it was just simply the small sample size meant that he had a couple of good performances in the Champions League and everyone was expecting more from him, or do you think there's more of an issue with him?
I think sorry, go on, Nate. Go on.
My small sample was the 2 or 3 games I'd watched of him at Shakhtar myself. I didn't see any data. I don't remember seeing any data, but yeah. So
yeah, but like even with the Champions League data, it looked good, and it was not like it was just a season. It was quite a lot more than that. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it
Right,
was.
so I'm sure it was like like it probably wasn't an ideal amount, but yeah. So you definitely got well over like 2,000 minutes worth of data, which like I don't know should be a decent enough sample not to be like completely confident, but to be like somewhat confident on what a player knows how to do or what to do. But I don't know, maybe he didn't adapt well. I don't know. But at the same time, when it comes to like social media and all that, again not quite sure if this is the best uh, judgment meter per se. But like when it comes to social media and stuff, he really seems to be getting along with Diogo Dalot and with the other Brazilian centre mid. So I wouldn't think that integration would be such an issue, and especially now that Mourinho is gone. But what do I know?
It is interesting though that he hasn't really been playing under Solskjaer, so there must be some kind of latency over why I guess people are feeling like he shouldn't be played in the Manchester United backroom. But I guess that's just speculation from us. We have another question from Janos Erde. Do you think Odegaard will get minutes for Real Madrid next year, and how do you see his situation? I think that's a good question. I know that Mads in the DM is a big fan of Odegaard, so
we all are, I think.
Yeah, I think
we all collectively are
so.
fans of Odegaard.
Kick off on Odegaard.
I can kick off on him. I wrote a bit on him like a couple of months ago. I think I still have it published. I have it published in Portuguese, but I did like a small thread with the main points in English on Twitter, and he's great. He's had two great seasons in the Eredivisie. He's an incredibly talented attacking midfielder, and he should easily get minutes at Real Madrid because he's easily as talented as Vinicius is, although a completely different profile, but you get what I mean. Whether you'll get those minutes or not, I don't know. But the Real Madrid's new manager seems to be giving minutes to the young players. Vinicius is now a full-on starter. Reguilón at left back has been playing a lot, even though I really didn't know him up to like a couple of months ago, and he's like 22 already. There's been Valverde as a centre mid that's played quite a bit. So like he has given minutes to plenty of youngsters, and even youngsters that we perhaps don't think are Real Madrid quality or will not be up to standard to stay in the team. But he has given them minutes, so in theory, it should be the type of manager to give minutes to Odegaard. But again, I'm not quite sure if he'll be the manager next season anyway. Pretty sure they couldn't just bring Odegaard back from loan in the middle of the season because it was agreed up to the end. So it's a bit of a moot point. But teams should definitely go after him if they see that Real Madrid aren't gonna take advantage of his talent because he didn't cost them that much. So you probably still pick him up for like I don't know, 2 times what he costed to Real Madrid, and it'd still be an absolute bargain, you know. So
I doubt they're interested in selling him. I think they still have their eye on his long-term future.
well, that'd be awesome. It's Real Madrid, so
yeah. I agree with you that he is, good enough to at least be an asset to their squads next season, as he is. I suspect that they will probably send him out on a different loan to a club of a higher stature, and I think they will and should be looking for a club who will have more of the ball, essentially, so he can simulate a more similar experience to being at Real Madrid and being on the side who have most of the ball most of the time.
Yeah, a Valencia tier type of team. Something like that could be interesting, but again, it fully depends on what Real Madrid's doing that season. Because if they're just carrying on whatever this is, then he's definitely got a spot in the team, and he has a manager that will probably give him minutes. If they get to the summer and they're like, we need a new manager and a ton of new investment and all of that, then he should definitely go to the loan route. So still a long time to go, but he's doing well. He's doing super well, and he's done something very good about him is that he's done very well under two completely different style managers, and he's done well in a more possession-based side, Aaron Veen, last season, and he's now in a less possessive Vitesse side with Slutsky in charge, the Russian manager, and it's not like he's known for this incredible style of positional play. He isn't, and Odegaard is defending a lot more and playing a lot deeper, and he's still doing the damn thing, as the kids say. So, yeah.
Why do we think that Real Madrid have taken so long to develop him, or at least not been keen to get him playing early, which they have with some of their other players?
Simply that he's so young. Is that like it's easy to think of him as, you know, a player who's been on the scene for 3 or 4 years, but he's still a child. Let me just check his age.
I think he's 20 now. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 20. So, but that's still, you know, that's still.
Yeah, but at 20, he has like thousands and thousands of senior minutes in his legs already, and like it's actually incredible.
It does feel as though they're being a little bit more cautious with his development than they have with other players of similar ages, right?
I think he became so high profile when the transfer was made that like I think Real Madrid are trying to come out of this the best that they can in terms of image, and it's not like it costs them anything to like send him out on loan or whatever. And at the moment, like best case scenario, he comes back and he does well, and worst case scenario, they move him on to a successful team on a profit, or at least in a deal that will benefit the player or whatever, and they don't come off as huge, you know, assholes. So, I think they're somewhat trying to protect themselves. I think we have a question on Europa League that
just got that highlighted. Actually, I was going to go there next.
Yeah, I think you should.
The question is from Afro Davis, and he says, "Are there any under the radar Europa League ties you would recommend giving a watch?" I think there's plenty of interesting Europa League ties. I'm not entirely sure what counts as under the radar. Perhaps teams that we wouldn't necessarily. I mean, obviously teams we wouldn't expect to be in a good fixture. But in terms of maybe the ones that we have got our eye on as in the radar, I'd say this: Shakhtar Donetsk versus Eintracht Frankfurt.
Yes, very much so.
Sporting Villarreal, Celtic Valencia.
Yeah, that's the one for me.
Interesting ones.
Lazio Sevilla is definitely the one for me.
Yeah, that's the one as well. Yeah, cool. Is there any that you think, Ben, that would come under that sort of title of being under the radar that we've not talked about?
Yeah, there's a couple of small London clubs playing that you should probably check out.
Good.
I also like to watch Salzburg whenever they play in Europe for obvious tactics nerd reasons.
Yeah,
that is fair. I'm probably gonna end up watching the Portuguese teams, even though I'm not particularly excited for their ties. Like you mentioned, Sporting Villarreal, but like Villarreal are doing super poorly this season. I'm even curious if they like focus in Europa League at all, or if they keep on just having an awful campaign. But like from the ties that we haven't mentioned, I think Krasnodar against Leverkusen is very, very interesting. Krasnodar are doing very fun things this season. They just got Chris Olsen in, who I really, really like, and they're playing full-on possession football. Young manager, they're setting in the league still, I'm pretty sure, and they're playing Leverkusen, who are now under.
Managed by your favourite manager.
Yeah, under Peter Bosz. So I'm definitely rooting for Krasnodar there. I don't know. I don't even know why. I think that Europa League final just like completely rubbed me the wrong way. And for Peter Bosz, it was just such an idiotic approach that he kind of fell off with me from there. Betis is always a fun watch, and they're playing away to Gen. I don't know much about this Gen team. I know their players, but I don't know like how they play. They have a couple of interesting players. They have Ben Arfa still doing fun things at 31, so that could be a draw to look out for. Yeah, I think we mentioned all the big ones. We're mostly mentioning the ones that are 50-50 or 60-40 for teams to go through, and that are between teams that are fun, because no one wants to watch Chelsea beat up on Malmo or
Chelsea, right?
Yeah, we're all going to be rooting for Malmo and whomever plays Arsenal. But yeah.
Anyone want to add anything on the Europa League, or should we move on? We've got an interesting question about Aaron Ramsey, who apparently is either 30 years old or 28 years old. What's your opinion on his move, and what will he bring to a not so exciting but competent, experienced Juventus team? That's Rodrigo Car. I'm not going to say his name.
That's a Portuguese name. You gotta say it. You gotta say it, John. You gotta say it.
I mean, I have no idea how to say it, but Carvalho.
Caio.
Yeah, it's closer to what Nathan said. But
That's like the Englishization of.
yeah, it is, because it's usually just Carvalho.
Carvalho.
See, you did it. All right, go on.
Go on, Nat.
Answer, Nathan.
Okay.
You love a good gunner.
So the first thing with Ramsey is that the conversation around the move at the moment is being dictated by his reported weekly fee, which is hugely boosted by the fact that he's getting a signing on fee for the fact that he's leaving on a free. So I'm very keen to avoid the discussion of should he be earning those wages, because that's a poor look at the context, and that's not the question. With all respect, I just wanted to get that in there. Looking at the move in general, yeah, he's still a quality player, obviously, as much as it is painful for me to acknowledge, and I'm glad that he's leaving England. Juventus have this brilliant string of signing players on a free. I do feel like they always have a lot of box-to-box midfielders, which I would include Ramsey as. I need to have a look at their squad before I get too carried away with that answer. But yeah, young enough still, even if he was 30, to be a decent signing.
I mean, yeah, I think they do have a lot of box-to-box midfielders, but they don't really have someone with this ability to get in the box. Still, from like if you check the profile of their midfielders, you have like Ganic is more of like a deep line playmaker, if you will, if you want to use those FM terms. Even guys like Matuidi, Bentancur, Emre Can, none of them provide the box arrival that Ramsey obviously does, nor the final pass that Ramsey does to a certain extent as well. So he provides a bit of a different profile, but at the same time, you start wondering the same thing that you wondered at Arsenal, which was when they did play a 4-2-3-1, they often played him as like the most advanced of the three midfielders, and then you started questioning if he could play as one of the two deeper midfielders, and it probably wasn't a great idea. And if that isn't a great idea, then you start wondering about where Dybala would fit. And then if you start wondering about where Dybala would fit, and Dybala's been playing on the wing quite a bit this season, but still. And then it's just a whole lot of different questions about him fitting into the team. But he is under, if Allegri stays, he'll be under a much better manager than he was at Arsenal. So that will obviously be someone that should be able to fit him in somewhere, I hope.
Yeah. I should make an honourable mention to Owen James Brown, who has tweeted us actually saying...
He said cute things.
He said, I feel like Nathan's tash is getting quite Tiago-esque. I love that, and this, and you guys. So thanks for that, Owen. Thoughts on the moustache situation, Nathan? Is that something you're consciously doing, just morphing into Tiago?
Well, yeah, I've dyed my hair the wrong direction for that. I did suddenly realise that I was about to be on video, and that like I had to like actually wear clothes and.
Nathan was fully nude. By the way, the
reason why Tiago's camera is not because he can't record video without being naked. So
no, that's factually incorrect. The reason why my camera isn't on is simply because if my camera is on and my mic is on, my computer starts doing some sort of weird noise that John and Nathan complain about, and that therefore you all would complain about as well. Yeah. So we're just protecting your ears, I guess, and your eyes from seeing my face. So double.
Jason has asked a question about Leeds United. I don't know if you guys are interested in that.
Go on,
in Leeds United or in Jason? Because I like Jason, I don't like Leeds.
Wow. See what you think, Tiago. I hate all Portuguese clubs. The question is, will Leeds get promoted? And if they are, will ownership invest enough to stay up? Which I think is an interesting, broader question, actually, because I do think that's probably the case. I think Leeds have been bought out by someone who is treating them as a business venture, and I think he has all the potential to be an Italian Mike Ashley. And I wonder whether or not we're going to see this sort of thing happening more in future. Whether or not Leeds will get promoted is another matter entirely. I think they'll certainly have a shot at it, either in going through obviously automatically or finishing in the top 6. So having a chance of going through the playoffs. I suspect that the pessimist in me says playoffs at the moment. It does depend as well on what the EFL decide to do. If they decide to do anything and they're conveniently hanging on as though they sort of want to find out what sort of point deduction they need to give to Leeds so that they can't go up. But that's the pessimist and cynic in me talking. But I think they'll have a shot of promotion, but I'm too pessimistic to think they'll make it through. If they can, yeah, you go.
I think that's some. Like, I don't want to comment on Leeds specifically too much because I only know everything I know about Leeds is to annoy you, and it's very low. But on the whole, investing as you get promoted into the Premier League thing, I think last summer arguably provided a very interesting test case and I'm wondering how it will affect future windows, which was the fact that Fulham invested a lot, and to my knowledge and to the knowledge of most people on the analytics side of things, Fulham invested well, or in good players at least, and then the whole fitting situation didn't really occur properly or whatever. But point is, Fulham invested a lot of money and invested well and are in a very dire situation, while Cardiff barely brought in anyone. They brought in. They bring in. They brought in like Ariata on loan, Camarazza on loan. So they brought in Bobby Reid. They did bring in Bobby Reid and Josh Murphy, but like Josh Murphy isn't even a starter a lot of the time. So like their biggest transfers were 2 loanees and Bobby Reid, who is a starter and who's pretty fine. I don't mind Bobby Reid, but point is Cardiff barely invested at a really poor squad in the Championship, and now were by far the worst team in the Premier League in terms of squad quality, and are looking like they're going to stay up. Luckily, fortunately, and I'm wondering how much of an impact that could have in future markets, simply because you see a team that invested a ton and that could end up going back down and having a ton of trouble, then getting rid of all these players that they invested on that are on too much wages for the Championship, and a team that barely invested and that have a super old school manager and that play completely Route 1 football and that are probably going to stay up. So yeah, there's definitely going to be repercussions from that, I think.
I think it's interesting you say that as well, because we've seen similar things happen with teams like Burnley, and I think Huddersfield are probably the best example, right? Huddersfield go up and everyone just expected them to go down straight away, and they had that one season where they stayed up. But
Huddersfield and Burnley, particularly Huddersfield, had a really impressive manager who kind of did the absolute best with those players, a bit like Bielsa is doing with the Leeds squad right now. I don't think any other manager would get this specific group of players where they would be, where they are right now. And Burnley, to a certain extent, it was a mix of manager, but like their transfers have always been like solid. Like guys like Tarkowski coming in is really, really good, and you don't really see people speaking about it. It's just like very specific. They didn't bring in a bunch of transfers all at once. They brought in very specific transfers, like every other transfer market, and it worked. And they had a really good manager as well. So like a bit of different situations, I think. But
you do with the fact that obviously when Huddersfield came up and Burnley came up as well, they didn't spend huge amounts of money. They had their way of doing things and they stuck to that, and it works out well in the short term to have a method and to apply that method and go with it. So do you think it's anything to do with that? Whereas with Fulham, it felt as though they brought in just loads of good players, and it was never going to be the case that they were just.
I mean, Nathan summed up the Fulham situation really well a couple of months ago. Whenever you wrote about Fulham, God knows when that was. Yeah, so whenever you wrote about Fulham, then Ash did the same thing, exact same thing. Curiously enough, afterwards, but whatever. Point is, they brought in good transfers, but I think Nathan should take over here, but like to adapt to the style that they wanted to play would obviously take a while. And then turned out they brought in a new manager, and the new manager is completely different to Jokanovic. It's just a whole mess. And they're so lucky to have Mitrovic, because without Mitrovic, they'd be a dumpster fire. Nathan?
Yeah, so I think essentially because they had such a huge turnover in the squads, they needed to sort of be taught the system over again. And I think that Jokanovic takes quite a while to get his team behaving off the ball the way he wants them to. And if you're a promotion side, you don't have a season to give away, because you'll be relegated and then everything changes and you lose half your players and everything else. And then, but simultaneously, suddenly switching out this manager when you've bought an entire possession squads, and then bringing in Ranieri is going to give you similar problems. I don't know. I don't think it's totally out of the question that they could escape. Relegation. It's not looking good.
I mean, they are 8 points away now, Nathan.
They've had a rough run as well recently. It feels like they play big teams every week at the moment.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're down. I think it's too late for them, really.
I have a lot of trouble sympathizing with Ranieri. But like, I don't know. When you like, having Mitrovic definitely benefits the whole long ball situation, because he's incredible at holding up play. But like everything else in the squad, again, they were super lucky to have a striker that was able to adapt to both styles and just kind of do whatever. Because he's the single transition point that can just be fine regardless, and he's been somewhat consistent. Because beyond that, like Sessegnon isn't even playing anymore. Kenny doesn't play, even though he's team captain and he's great. You barely see Seri. Like, if Fulham go down, there's so many good players to poach there.
Well,
and then you'll see the players having success elsewhere, and then you're gonna be like, oh, they had a good squad, they just couldn't.
Yeah.
Or they had good players, they didn't have a good squad. If that makes more sense.
On those lines, which are while we're on the clubs at the bottom of the Premier League, which relegated players would deserve another shot at the Premier League with a different club. So I guess you've named some of those for Fulham. What about the?
Kearney deserves it so much.
Huddersfield, I guess, and which is the other team that's down there?
Newcastle? No, Southampton.
So it keeps switching back and forth between Cardiff and Newcastle.
And Southampton. Right now, it's Southampton.
Okay, and Southampton.
I guess Huddersfield, you're going to say Philip Billing and Aaron.
Yeah,
Moore.
definitely Billing.
Yeah.
But beyond those two,
Huddersfield is a very rough squad. I think you can make the case that under the right conditions, Steve Mounier could be a very useful asset. He's like only 24. He's like good at winning aerials. He's good defensively. I guess he shoots sometimes. He's a solid striker. He should be fine for a Premier League team, but at the same time, you probably find better out there. Beyond that, I don't know. Philip Billing should be poached though. Fulham is pretty much the entire squad.
Yep.
I think we all agree on that. I think Schürrle will continue with them in the Championship or whatever, but I think everyone else is just gonna come back up. Or not everyone else, but a good portion of the players. They have a couple of players on loan as well, so it's not like, yeah. About Southampton and Cardiff and Newcastle, I don't know. I'd need to check their squads. But Newcastle still has a couple of interesting players. I think they have a lot of players like entering their prime now. I think guys like Ward-Prowse and Redmond and like Ings and all of that, all those players that were so hyped up, they're all now achieving their prime and they could be useful for other teams. The Danish centre mid is interesting. Højbjerg. I like the look of the Scottish guy who doesn't play
McDonald,
Armstrong. No, Armstrong.
Kevin Armstrong.
Yeah.
Someone that Nathan liked.
Oh, Nathan likes Lamina. You like, this is so ridiculous. You like Lamina, but you don't like Billing. You know how much better Billing is as a player. Billing is a billion times better than Lamina at doing everything.
I've come round on Billing. You've convinced me. So
yeah, well, that's not my point. Is just like you can't like Lamina and then not like Billing. Lamina.
Both of them. Leave them alone.
Lamina. What kind of name is that? Lamina. Sorry, go on. I got distracted.
Esteval.
Well, yeah, I can't do anything about that. What I can do is make fun of other people's names and make myself feel better.
Speaking of names, Yanis Erdai says it is back on Odegaard. Wants to know if Odegaard could be a potential Ozil replacement at Arsenal.
That'd be fun.
Pressing numbers are pretty good, I think, and he brings that same dangerous final ball as an Ozil replacement.
Yeah, that's so fun. I like that.
Yeah, I think there's a very clear sort of aesthetic similarity.
Hey, Luke. Sorry, Nathan. He said I had to say I back. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, there's a very clear sort of aesthetic similarity between Ozil and Odegaard, and I think that their production isn't entirely dissimilar. I think that Odegaard should be focusing, as much as he has control over things, his development around being more of an Ozil type player and lean away from the sort of more athletic, more take-ons focused game that it might be tempting to lean towards when you have a technical, athletic sort of leg up on everyone around you.
That's just adding on to that. I think it'd be awesome, first and foremost, and I think I'd be even rooting to watch Arsenal sometimes. Be excited to watch Arsenal, which never happens. But it's never gonna happen, is it? Because they don't play Ozil, so they're not gonna replace Ozil. Like if Ozil goes, they're not gonna replace him because they don't use a player of his type anymore.
Well, I think the reason that Ozil isn't getting game time is because of his lack of effort off the ball, which is something I've always been quite dubious of. But I think what we've seen under Emery is that you take his word for it, based on.
I'm really not like. Is this a bit of another Pogba versus Mourinho situation where you need to find which one is the most valuable asset? Because if it is, I'm leaning towards the player again.
But if you're suggesting that you could get Odegaard to do Ozil plus pressing, then just bring in Odegaard and
yeah, sure. But where does he play? Like you're gonna put him like on the right of a 3-4-3, like on the.
Actually managing Arsenal, so I don't know.
I'm just.
Put it.
It's just weird. I'd definitely bring him in though. I think I like the idea. I think you can definitely do like a year-long deal with a clause or something, and it could be a happy times for everybody.
Where would Ozil go, incidentally, after that?
I mentioned that on Twitter the other day, and I stupidly suggested Bayern Munich, to which everyone said, "Oh, you absolute lemon! Bayern Munich hate Ozil and they ate his guts and whatever." And I'm like, "Yeah, I forgot about that because I don't like Bayern Munich." But yeah, so I guess Bayern Munich is out of option. Fuck that, right? But I was looking at teams and I'm just like wondering who could afford Ozil in terms of like wages plus his fee as a 30-year-old or 31-year-old or whatever he is. Like he's not going back to the top two in Spain. I think the best suggestion I got when I tweeted that was Juventus. Yeah. But if he's going to Juventus, where the hell does Ramsey fit? Where the hell does Dybala fit? They have the same issue that Arsenal have had all these years, which is fitting Ramsey and Ozil together. And then Ozil's just going to end up on the wing, and it's just a whole mess. And if he doesn't go to Juventus, I'm really not quite sure. I saw PSG being suggested as well, to which I say they have Draxler. They have, I don't know. I think Draxler probably can do somewhat similar things while also running more, I guess, and being younger and German. So I don't know. It's a tough player to fit somewhere. I don't think a team like Dortmund would give him a chance.
Yeah, essentially, if we take the idea of the pressing situation as given, then he needs to go to a league with a slower pace,
China.
or like a significantly lesser league like China or like MLS or.
You can't cut it in MLS. MLS is so running based, and I'm not saying you obviously can cut it in MLS, but imagine Ozil staying in the bench for the Philadelphia Union. But MLS is very running. But like, if he just wants to chill out, he'd probably prefer China. But like, I don't know, man. Doesn't it feel early for him to do that? Like,
How old is he? He must be getting on a bit.
maybe a team like Inter or AC Milan or something could pick him up.
A Serie A team who can
A
afford.
Serie A team that aren't Juventus, like Inter or AC Milan, could probably do with them. Well, AC Milan now have Paqueta and whomever else, Çalhanoğlu, but Inter could be interesting, even though they have certain players of his type somewhat. But yeah, I think probably Serie A would be the place for him. Juventus is an interesting suggestion, but again, with their team right now, I'm not quite sure where he fits. So just let him walk to Italy and just chill out there and get picked up by some team.
We have a suggestion of him going to Turkey, I think. Could just be someone writing the word Turkey in the chat.
Diamond Turkey. You said diamond? Maybe.
I guess that might be a question to Nathan. I don't know.
Very complicated situation. I think he has he's simultaneously been criticised for his appearance of support for Erdogan, but also I think that might have been like a corrective thing. So yeah, I think politically that's complicated. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think there's a situation with that situation.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Jason's saying they can't afford him, but Ozil to Milan would be fun, which I think we would all agree with our secret love affair for Milan now. Diamond to fit Ozil and Ramsey is what the word diamond was. I can't believe we didn't pick up on that. No. I guess we've been over an hour now, so we should think about closing things up.
Yeah, just see if there's any more like single questions. Would like your view on Schneiderlin? Well, you seem.
What a question to end the session with. But
I know, right?
Schneiderlin. I think you Spurs. We finally got a Spurs question for you, Nathan.
It's about time. We've been in here for a while now.
You taking Schneiderlin, Nathan?
No, I used to be really excited about Schneiderlin. I used to be really into him. And then it's just gone, since he went to United and also Everton, it's just been a terrible, terrible time for him. I guess that sort of poses the question that, did he need Pochettino in order to be as good as he was? And therefore, would it make sense for him to arrive at Tottenham now? But I think you have to look at what he's done.
He's too old.
And now he's old. So, yeah, he's had a weird career because I used to think he was amazing, and things have changed.
We should end with the Grand Gendo. His question about half spaces. He is persisting in that direction. He says not sure Schneiderlin knows what half spaces are, but these are not so cryptic references to a debate. I use scare quotes in this sense on Twitter.
Well, it's a debate between the entirety of Twitter and any person that is able to recognize shapes, and Nathan's French pal, who is not clearly unable to recognize shapes. So I'm really not sure what's there to discuss. Maybe Nathan can provide a bit of a different point of view, having an account he personally knows the victim of such such situation in which everyone's making fun of certain thought processes over a term that's fairly common, and that just identifies a shape, it shouldn't be this big of a deal. Nathan.
Yeah, it's not an interesting conversation either.
It is fun, though, to a certain extent.
It may have been in the past.
I suppose the way that I would look at it is, and this is a really, really sort of, I don't know, it's a bit of a forced comparison, but obviously in the world of science, people couldn't really talk about light properly until they thought about it functioning as a wave and as a particle. Do we think that the same could be true for the concept of half spaces? Which again, I wasn't particularly invested in the debate on Twitter, but it seemed to be whether or not you could talk about the half space as a static physical space on a pitch, or whether or not you needed to talk about it as more of a shifting space.
That's so dumb. What the fuck? It's like me saying, that's like me referencing like the final third, and you're questioning whether the final third moves, and I'm like, depends. I guess it depends on where the fuck I'm attacking, but like beyond that, not really. Like,
But I guess that's the kind of point of what I'm saying. Is it sometimes useful for us to think of the half space as a static space, or is it sometimes useful for us to think of it as being relative to, say, the pitch, the players on the pitch, for example? In the same way that, if you talk about breaking the lines, which was another concept that was thrown up, obviously the lines.
but that's a different thing, right? Does the lines move, and the breaking the lines is an action, right? Breaking the present continuous in the verb. Nathan, correct me. No, you're the English major. The present continuous or past continuous, present continuous, definitely, isn't it?
Yeah.
In breaking, right, invokes an action, a present action, even, right? Therefore, breaking the lines is an action and not the identification of a space. It's the identification of an action, right? An action. So kicking the ball, breaking the lines, passing the ball, and then half spaces are just a spot that you identify. There's the goal, there's the halfway line, there's the final third if we're attacking that way, or our defensive third if we're defending that way. And those are the half space, those are the white spaces, those are you don't have to use these connotations if you don't want to. You can call them wherever the fuck you want, but it's just like, but we happen to call them half spaces because we find that useful. You don't have to, it's all good, but like, I think the definition for the people that do use it, or the most common definition for the people that do use it, does not invoke some sort of movement, since it's a space on the pitch, right? I don't know. It just feels like a weird discussion to me. Like, definitely, I'm not trying to say that it's like this concept that everyone should use. I find it useful, but it's not like I'm gonna fucking die with half spaces tattooed across my chest. It's just like, it's kind of whatever. It's just a space on the pitch.
You might go that far, to be honest. You seem quite passionate about it.
I'm just, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. I'm gonna let Nathan take over.
So, as I was saying before, language is defined by its use, right? And I've seen half spaces used to mean both a static space and a space that is relative to where it's positioned on the pitch. And I've used it both ways myself. So I think both interpretations are perfectly valid.
Then I'm just ignorant.
The entire is ridiculous. Yes, we can crowdfund the tattoo, Grant.
So I think what the point we've arrived at the end of this discussion is that if we raise enough money, Tiago will get the word half space tattooed across his chest. So,
well, not across my chest. I can definitely do that, but just not across my chest. I have plenty of other spaces. We can work that out then.
We'll find the half space to label half space on you.
Yeah, that's fine with me. We can tattoo a half space.
Have to be, fortunately.
Nathan has to tattoo it with me, or John, because John has tattoos. You guys don't know, but John is like fully tattooed. John has his hands tattooed. He's super badass. He looks like a regular old white dude, but he's actually someone with a dot tattooed on his finger or whatever. So yeah, you can tattoo one half space, and I'll tattoo the other, and then Nathan tattoos the goal line or whatever the fuck across his face.
The goal line, do you agree, is a static thing? That doesn't move.
Good.
Of course, you're a Liverpool fan, right? But I hope everyone's enjoyed this tentative deep delve into the world of YouTube Live. I guess we'll try and do this on a semi-regular basis.
Yeah, we're also going to try and figure out how to make my camera useful without making your ears explode.
Yeah, we shall try and do that. It might involve having to get a microphone or something. But other than that, you can follow me at John_Mackenzie. You can follow Nathan at Nathan A. Clark. And you can follow Tiago at some Portuguese sounding handle. It's at Tiago Estva. Is that right?
It's at Tiago ESTV. Yeah, I just tried to simplify my last name, right, for the English folk, and then I realized it didn't really help that much. So it's kind of a weird thing now, but whatever. We'll go with it. It's fine.
And it's Tiago, not Thiago. The Spanish, is that Spanish way?
What, with an H?
Yeah.
That's Brazilian way.
Brazilian. Those Brazilians, eh? Well, thank you very much for listening. I am going to end the broadcast now, but do keep an eye out on all of our Twitter feeds. If we do this again, it will come up. And if you have any suggestions about how we can do it better, if you have any questions you'd like us to ask next time, do let us know. But until then, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.